Oh, congressional lawmakers are gearing up for a fight on gun control legislation after they return to Washington after the August recess. You know, this is as the White House reportedly plans to release a series of gun proposals in the coming weeks, including some updates to the current background check system, all in the wake of those continued horrible mass shootings that our country has been suffering. Joining me now is former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, longtime member of Congress, now chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute, which says it is aimed at the professional development of conservative staffers and elected officials. Senator, welcome. You are a you're a longtime veteran of Capitol Hill. You know what goes on and what happens behind closed doors. So what type of legislation, if any, do you expect we will see and will be most likely?
Well, our hearts break every time we hear of mass shootings. I'm afraid, though, Eric, it's more symptomatic of a decline in our culture. I'm not sure any new laws are going to help that. Congress could do more than anything else by setting a better example of how to treat people and how to treat each other. They're probably the biggest instigators of hate and racism and violence in the country right now themselves. So they need to look inward at just how they behave. As far as laws go, more federal laws are very unlikely to help. We already have background checks. Where we see improvement is at the state and community level, where states and people are doing more to protect buildings and facilities. They're doing more to try to deal with drug use and mental illness. I'm not sure what the president is going to recommend, but I am confident that Congress is not the one who can solve this problem, except by setting a better example of how we should behave and our civility as a nation.
So the president has been talking about strengthening, as he says, meaningful background checks. Critics say that certainly is a step. A lot more has got to be done. So you're saying you don't think that background check legislation, or how about red flag laws, will be able to get through Congress?
Well, red flag laws, 15 states already have them, Eric, and we see that they're not working. They actually give someone who has a grudge against you the ability to send police to your house, to take your guns away, drag you into court, cost you thousands of dollars. And for the most part, it's all been against law-abiding citizens who haven't created any crime. We do need to look at the problem, though. We cannot ignore it. But I'm not sure. I mean, we have background checks, as I mentioned. When they say universal background checks, what they're talking about is a national registry so the government knows who owns guns and what guns they own. But we've seen how the government can misuse data like IRS information, and it's not going to affect law-abiding citizens except by taking their rights away. And all the data shows that those who don't care about the laws, who commit these crimes, are not going to follow laws anyway, Eric. And I'm afraid that the bad news here is that if someone decides they want to hurt or kill someone else in our country, they're going to find a way to do it. So we need to make sure we do everything we can to protect our citizens and just improve our culture in a way that this type of violence is certainly not exhibited by our leadership.
But critics would say, wouldn't it be worth to save one life to strengthen the loophole, such as the gun show loophole and other background checks?
Well, I'm not aware of a gun show loophole. I mean, I've heard people try to explain it, but if you buy a gun at a gun show, you have a background check and you have to wait. And if you have committed a crime, you're not going to be able to buy it. So if there are loopholes, generally what that is the proper enforcement. The bureaucrats have not done their job. So we certainly should look at enforcing the laws we already have on the books. But, Eric, I think the best way to do this is to allow 50 states and all the communities around the country to do their best at trying to keep violence down, and for the federal government to study where it's really working and where it's not, because red flag laws, we have 15 of them. They're not working well, and they're just basically taking away the rights of law-abiding citizens.
Here's a Fox News poll, Senator, a couple of weeks ago this month. 90% of those questioned favor criminal background checks. 81% favor red flag laws. And then here's one, 67% support banning assault rifles and semi-automatic weapons. That's the assault weapons ban that President Clinton, had passed and then was repealed when the Republicans didn't go for that. What about the possibility of banning what the critics call weapons of war that should not be on the streets of America, that we have seen turned against us so violently by some of these gunmen?
Well, I'd have to see what kind of weapons of war they're talking about. Again, we don't have indication that trying to pass laws to keep certain types of guns away from people, they'll just move to another type of gun. And we've seen that if they can't get a gun, they'll use a knife, they'll create bombs. I think as long as you're trying to look at federal laws that target everybody, you generally miss the criminals. And we already have criminal background checks. If they do background checks when you buy guns now, if you've got a criminal record, you're not going to get one. So there's a lot of hyperbole going around right now, and I think if we're going to do something, we should do something that works. And that involves addressing a lot of problems at the cultural level. Politicians who are encouraging drug use and legalization of marijuana and other things like that are more the problem than the solution. So I'll be curious of what President Trump comes out with. I'd love to see Trump and the Congress work together and demonstrate how people with opposing views can treat each other with more civility. I think that would do a lot to tap down what we feel in our culture today. So, again, Eric, I want to stop this, but I don't see any evidence that federal laws can do it.
All right, we'll be seeing. And, Senator, as you say, waiting to see what the president proposes and what Speaker McConnell, the majority leader, McConnell, can put out on the table to try and address this horrendous problem that still affects us. Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina. Senator,
thank you, Eric.
Former Senator, thank you for joining us, of course. Molly?
Thank you, Eric.